Welcome to a sunny new podcast where I'll be speaking to people from the arts, business and beyond, and shining a light on their stories of success on the South Coast. Welcome to Success on the South Coast. In today's episode, I'm talking to Steve Jones. Steve was part of the management team that transformed Fitness First into the largest independent health club chain in the world. He went on to co-chair a government employee engagement task force, and for the last 20 years he's worked with senior leadership teams across the globe on leadership and management skills, strategy, employee engagement and motivation. We also talk about the importance of talent attraction and retention, the focus of his latest book, How to Become an Employer of Choice. Steve is passionate about making people and businesses outstanding. He's great company and full of wisdom. I really enjoyed our chat and I'm sure you will too. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's do this. Welcome, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Stuart.
Excellent.
Real pleasure.
Well, it's funny because we only met just a few minutes round the corner from here, and I was telling you the story before that I was on a lunch break and I literally had 45 minutes and I knew the B2B Expo was on, and I thought I'll run round, see what's going on. And when I was there, I saw that there was a workshop called Unlocking Employee Engagement and Motivations, which is a subject that I'm really passionate about. So I ended up coming and sitting in on that session, and I was sat there thinking after a few minutes, I've got to get this guy on the podcast. I was still in the early kind of stages of coming up with the idea, but you were so engaging and it was a subject that I really find fascinating. So it's great for me that you were one of the very first people that I reached out to, and here we are.
Yeah, well, I'm honoured to be here, Stuart. It's a real pleasure.
Excellent. So during that session we talked about the employee engagement wheel, which we have here, which I want to go into in a lot more detail, but I always start by talking a little bit about the person's journey so far. And on a podcast called Success on the South Coast, it only feels right that we start by talking about Fitness First, which is definitely one of the region's success stories. It became a global gym empire with 360 clubs or thereabouts. And the interesting thing is it started only 5 minutes down the road with the first club in Queen's Park in Bournemouth in 1993. You joined in 1996, so can you pick up the story and tell us a bit about your experiences there?
Yeah, well, it was I was working in the fitness industry. That's my background. And I think I'd just come back from working for Glaxo Wellcome. I'd been sorting out some of their gyms, working when clubs moving to gyms, and then this opportunity came along. I was actually, funny enough, I was at a presentation award for something I'd won up in Birmingham at the LIW, Leisure Industry Week, and the person who presented to me was Sean Phillips, who was actually the operations director for Fitness First.
Okay.
And he was quizzing me as to what I'd won, and then he got curious and he said, I think I need you to come and talk to me. Excellent. So then they offered me a job. So it's basically I went into the Fareham Club, which was just recently opened, and it was not getting the traction it should. It was being poorly managed. So
how many gyms did they have at that point then when you joined?
About 13, so it's the unlucky 13 probably. So they were quite new to the marketplace, and they got rid of the manager, and it was a bit of a mess, and all the staff were about to leave. That was what I was faced with. Okay. So they said, we think you can come in, and so I troubleshooted it for about 2 months, sorted it all out, and they thought, oh yeah, okay, I think you're wasted as a gym manager, so hence I became a cluster, what they call a cluster manager. So I was now then out opening clubs, kitting them out, training the staff, and then moving to the next club, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that was great fun, really exciting, but I still had to manage clubs, and if we lost managers, I had to step in. So there's been times where I'd be running 3 or 4 clubs and opening a club.
Yeah.
So it was very entrepreneurial, very exciting.
Wow.
Good fun.
And ultimately, I think over a period of, was it 7 years, you were part of that management team that actually took it to the world's biggest independent gym chain.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first had our what we call our cluster meetings, there would be about 14 managers in the room, and then eventually we're going to Blackpool. We had 300 event managers, receptionists, God knows what else. So it just took on a life of its own. Yeah. And then of course we were opening a club a week at one point in the UK and 2 worldwide. So it suddenly became this massive. It was really good fun until the city got hold of it, I'd say. And then
let's just pause 1 second, because as people will guess from the title of the podcast, one of the themes I like to touch on is success. and we'll come back to it, we'll touch on it as we go through the conversation, but just thinking back to your time with fitness first, what would success have looked like for you then? Was it just adding more clubs?
No, for me it was the entrepreneurial buzz, the fact that you could introduce new ideas, new ways of going to market, new ways of finding clients, the systems and processes that supported that. It was a fascinating journey, very entrepreneurial, and you can have a massive input to it. Yeah. And I felt that it touched on my creativity, so I was able to think outside the box and bring different things. And then when the city got hold of it, it changed because it became highly regulated, very systemised. And
I guess it becomes all about the bottom line then.
And to be fairness, we were running a bit scared of the city. So, we were responsible to the city. Therefore, my salespeople reporting every 15 minutes. That's what it felt like. It might not have been the truth, but that's what it felt like. So it just became... And then we used to have this thing called voicemail. And at the end of I don't know if you remember voicemail, but we didn't have email very much in those days. So you'd have this voicemail which you'd dial into to pick up your voicemails, and there'd be about 30 or 40 voicemails at the end of the day, all from people at head office trying to justify their roles, in my opinion. So it became actually a bit pointless to me, and I fell out of love with it. Well,
that's probably a good place to jump off then into the next phase of your journey, where you've ultimately ended up working in the kind of capacity you do now. Can you talk us through what that chapter looked like, and particularly around where you got the role as co-chair of that government task force looking at employee engagement?
So I left fitness first because actually it was the right thing to do. I felt really unmotivated, highly skilled but unmotivated. So I made the decision. I made a decision when I was a youngster that I think it was about 23. I'm just diversifying a bit here. But when I was 23, I worked out I spent most of my life sleeping, the rest of it working, and I'd have some social time. So whatever I did work-wise, I needed to enjoy. And if I didn't enjoy it, not to moan about it, to do something about it. So that was my remit. So
it's a great principle to live by, to be honest. It's a good lesson for people to think about.
Yes, and to be honest, it served me well, because I got to the point with Fitness First where I stopped enjoying what I was doing. And I fell out of love with the business. So I took some time out, took my share options, took some time out, and walked up and down the seafront where I live with my Jack Russell, looking like a hobo, thinking, well, what am I going to do now? What's next? And very quickly I realised that after having a bit of time out, I could probably help people with their growth, having experienced such vast growth. So I set up a coaching business to help companies grow. And within about sort of 6 months of doing that, I was approached by a company called Sherlaws that specialised in SME fast growth. So they were coming from Australia to the UK, and they contacted me, and I looked at all their methodologies, tools and techniques, and of course it mapped perfectly my Fitness First journey. So I had the experience plus the toolkit. So I started working with my clients, which I had to find and work with their methodologies, and it was great fun. I really enjoyed it. And about 3 years in, I had an epiphany moment. I thought, well, actually, do you know what? We're dealing with fast growth companies here, but the bit that's missing for me is there's nothing about leadership. and motivation and taking talent with you. Now, if you're going to grow a company fast, you need to attract and keep talent.
Okay.
So I started to look at those areas: leadership, motivation. Unbeknown to me, at the time it's called employee engagement.
Yeah.
Now, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was working with the government task force team. Said, "Look, I think you could add value."
Okay.
So I went up to London. Used to go up to the Engage for Success. That's the government task force team that was looking at employee engagement. They were looking at it because only 1 in 3 people were actually engaged in their work. So 2/3 of the population disengaged.
Which is really scary, isn't it, when you think about it as a statistic?
It's a frightening thing, and it was really good because they started to look at companies that were bucking the trend, that were doing it right, and they found 4 key things. So I co-chaired the steering committee for about 3 years, and I realised that actually we're finding all this information out, but nobody's doing anything with it.
Yeah.
So I thought, here's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I stepped away, and I went down to the Vitality Stadium, which again is quite close to here.
It is, yep.
And
home of AFC Bournemouth, for those that
don't know. I see you got a Bournemouth cap behind you, so you're obviously a fan. So I did a presentation to a bunch of business owners, and in the audience was a guy from Inspire called Warren Munson. So he had an accountancy firm, about 50 staff, 5 million turnover, and he said, "I think I need you to come and do some work with me." So I spent a year working with him and his senior management team. Now, he was interesting because he had come out of one of the big 4 accountancy firms in London.
Yeah.
They'd offered him a partnership, and when he looked at the partners, he said, "They all look so knackered and tired. Do I really want to go on that journey?" No. So he came down and set up a business, an accountancy firm, to look after entrepreneurs. And that was going really well, but 10 years in, it was starting to look like the company he'd left. And he'd focused, with his own admission, he'd focused on the money and fallen out of love with his business. So I spent a year getting him back in love with his business. And then he said, "Look, I think you could help one of my top clients, Ace Technologies," again a local firm, 100 staff, 18.5 million turnover. So I spent a year with them, with their board and their senior management team, and they were a second generation business. So we had old school and new school, going on, and the battle between we like it like it is and we want to change it.
Bit of a clash of cultures going on.
Yeah, massive clash, and then we had. So I spent a year with them, and then they transformed their business, and both businesses have since been sold.
Yeah.
And both businesses won awards for their employee engagement. So I thought, I've got something here. So then I thought, how do I simplify this so that it makes sense and I can sell it a lot easier? So I developed the Wheel of Engagement, which we're going to talk about.
And I was going to just say, because you mentioned earlier with regards to the task force, you uncovered 4 factors. Is that the 4 factors that we'll talk about in the wheel?
Yeah, it is, because they're 4 things. I can talk about them now if you want.
No, let's hold that thought and get back to it. But
so there's the 4 main themes, and I just created that's what I'd run through for a year with the 2 companies, and then I got asked to write that book which we've got, which is Mapping Motivation for Engagement. So that was commissioned by Routledge. So I thought, yes, I've got something here, but how can I productize it?
Yeah.
So I developed a 4-day leadership program, which is delivered every 3 weeks in a company over 2 to 3 months, which gives them all the tools and techniques they would need to cover off that wheel in their organisation and to think and behave like a good leadership team. So I productised that, and then I built the Wheel of Engagement, which we talked about, and then I've written a few books around the stuff.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's an amazing journey. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into all of the stuff around talent. So let's talk talent acquisition and retention. I heard Stephen Bartlett say that in his opinion, in a way, all organisations are basically recruitment companies, which I actually thought was a great way of looking at it. It's all about getting great people in, and he said his number one job was to recruit good people and create a culture where we get the best out of those people. In his role as like a CEO, he saw that as number one. So I wondered, from your point of view, is there empirical evidence that having great people who are engaged is a critical success factor?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, yes. The empirical evidence is when you get it wrong. Okay, I think so. If you think about, if you look at what Gallup is saying now, it's only 23% of staff are actually currently engaged in the UK. So it's not got any better, possibly a little bit worse.
1 in 4, roughly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so you think about that. Now, if you think about the cost of replacing staff, now it's hard to find talent anyway. The war on talent is a real issue. There's lots of people out there, but good people are hard to find. If you're going to grow an organisation, you want to retain your talent so you can grow, but also attract talent.
Yeah.
So if you also look at what Gallup say, Gallup will tell you that it costs you 1.5 to 2 times the salary to replace somebody.
Yeah.
So an average employee's salary is 30k in the UK. So that's going to cost you £45,000. An extra 15k. An average manager is £50,000. So that's going to cost you 75,000. An extra 25,000. Now that doesn't include the disruption in your business.
It's really significant numbers we're talking about here, isn't it?
And that doesn't include the disruption, by the way, and the fact that you can't find people.
Yeah.
And I was doing it with a law firm with 170 staff, and we identified 5 people who are at risk of leaving through the motivational mojo tool, and the managing partner, to his credit, drove around, sat with each of them and turned them around, because we've got the thing called the Great Resignation going on as well now, where people are deciding not to go back into the workplace as a result of COVID. You know, they're looking for better ways to live their lives, so they're choosing to opt out. So these 5 people, he wanted to save them, and he reckoned that saved him close to £1 million, because he would have had to replace them, plus they would have taken clients with them.
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, that doesn't include the disruption.
Yeah, it's another hidden cost, actually. You don't necessarily think about them taking clients away.
Now, if you think about that, then you think about sickness days. So if people aren't motivated or engaged, sickness goes up, absenteeism goes up. Now, I wouldn't want to be a manager today, because you're responsible for mental health as well.
Yeah.
Diversity, inclusion. So we're no longer managing the employee, we're managing the person now.
Yeah.
And the entire person, home life as well as work, because you're responsible for their mental health. That means that you're having to address everything.
Yeah.
So if people are motivated in their roles and working off energy, not resilience, they're less likely to fall foul of mental health, sickness and absenteeism, or fall out of love with the business.
Yeah.
So that's the premise I come from. Let's look after these people. Let's grow them in the organisation. Let's tap in. Let's get out of the way and tap into what drives and motivates them and harness it. And that will drive productivity, and it will drive success. Yeah.
No, it makes complete sense, that approach. But I guess on the flip side, what I always wonder, there's with all of that value that you've described, from productivity, everything, why are these big orgs so poor at it then generally? You speak to people, friends, and it seems like that a lot of particularly larger organizations, they don't focus on these areas of engagement. And it's kind of like, well, we're doing fine, thank you very much. And why do you think organizations are so poor at it when the value is so clear?
Well, a couple of things. 2 things here. Some organisations are so profitable they just churn staff, so they're happy to churn and pay the cost. Okay, that's probably not. I don't think they could be much more profitable if they harness their people. But but secondly, I think life moves at such a pace now that what managers and leaders forget is it's part of their role. It's not addition to their role, and they just don't have time to do it, so they neglect it.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about your people, your single most expensive item after your capital investment, and you're doing nothing. You do KPIs for your business. What about your KPIs for your people?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because a lot of organisations always claim that their people, affectionately known as human resources, are their biggest asset, but they don't seem to demonstrate it.
Well, you said it nicely. Human resource. They're human beings.
Yeah,
exactly. They're not a resource. They're beings. They're people, and you've got to treat them like that. And you've got to create this culture where people want to come to work, not have to come to work. And if you do that, you're going to get that discretionary effort, and that discretionary effort is going to transfer into profitability. Yeah. So it makes no sense to me why companies don't do this, but I think they just focus on the bottom line too much. Yeah. And they think that we pay these people they should do a job. I think it's a mind shift. I get asked to go into companies all the time by other people. You need to go and work with this company. I says, no, not even worth my work while walking through the door, because actually, do you know, when I walk through there, they just won't understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's just a churn thing.
So they really need to be in a position where they're open to new ideas and they're willing to make that leap.
Yeah, I call them transactional businesses, and what I want to do is transformational businesses. They're just transactional, and we'll get somebody else.
Yeah.
That's a transaction, whereas transformation is we'll develop our people, we'll grow, and we'll all enjoy the benefits.
Yeah. We've already talked a little bit about the context and the environment that we're currently in, and I love that phrase you use, war on talent.
Yeah.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on how we've ended up in that scenario?
Yeah, well, I think the Great Resignation's caused that. So a lot of people have opted not to go into work. They've got their side hustles, which have turned into proper jobs, or they retire early, or they've just got different. They'd rather driving around in a taxi or delivering stuff because it's less stress. There's a lot of stress in the work, and people are looking for opting out and doing their own thing. And it's all part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They get to a certain age where they want to do life on their terms, and that means I've had enough of the corporate world. I'll either start a business or actually I'll go and do something else. So you've got this amazing amount of talent at the top end, 45 to 50 years upwards, that's going to be leaving businesses because they simply just want to do their own thing. And unless you can work out how to keep them in their business and allow them to do their own thing within your business, you're going to constantly have this war on talent, because actually to try and replace some of that skill set is really, really difficult to find the people, and everybody's after it. And even, I've got recruitment agencies I work with, even they struggle to find the people. So there's a lot of people out there, not good people there.
So I guess there is a positive story in there somewhere, though, because I guess if you're the right candidate, is it a talent's market at the moment then, because of that lack of supply, would you say?
Absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, we're on the south coast. The other challenge we've got is down here is we can't pay London rates, and someone can sit at home and get a London rate from a London company. So there's other challenges, but typically, if you are talented, you're going to be in demand. Simple as that.
And that's interesting, because I was going to ask you whether these challenges vary from place to place. So you think, I mean, obviously we're focused here in the south coast, but in this area, is that the main challenge now? The fact that this kind of move to a lot of people working from home, that their local resources have that flexibility to look elsewhere?
Yeah, well, it comes full circle a little bit, because that's the idea of building a strong culture. So I've got an organisation where I know one of the individuals has been offered £5,000 to £6,000 more to go elsewhere towards London, but he's turned it down, basically because he loves the business he's working in. So when we look at the intrinsic motivations of staff, he's getting what he wants. It's not about money for him. So it's not always about money, and that's the thing about the South Coast. I think if you can build your culture so you are a great place to work and people are going to enjoy it, and that means flexing lifestyle and that kind of stuff, so you can pick kids up and things like that, rather than just 9 to 5 grind, you're going to start attracting that talent, not because of the money but because of the business.
No, definitely, totally agree with all that. And I guess we've touched on this as well, but now that all these people are working from home, it does give organisations a completely different challenge in terms of employee engagement, because number one, the traditional things, you haven't got your eyes on them all of the time. So how has employee engagement changed, and what kind of tools are in place now to keep a more kind of distributed workforce engaged?
It's interesting, because I've got a client, the HubSpot client, that basically they've employed people they've never met, and they work in foreign countries, and it works perfectly. So there is that element of hybrid working has worked, or even just full working from home. But also, to your question, I think that's the point of having good leadership skills and understanding that people are motivated different ways, and how you manage those motivations. For instance, if someone wants that freedom to work from home, the last thing you want to do is be a control freak around them. trying to check in on them every 5 minutes, because that's going to drive them mad if they like freedom. So the way to manage them is to give them clear, concise instructions about what you'd like to achieve, agree it with them, and then leave them alone and agree on a reporting process, and then it's going to work. So it's challenging managers to think in different ways around, okay, this person's working from home, what's the best way I can interact with them? And by understanding what drives and motivates them, it's going to really help them understand. Let's say someone who's got what we call friend profile, so they like a community of people around them. You send them home to work, you've isolated their whole community.
Yeah.
Okay. And if when COVID hit, that person was really struggling, so you'd have to put your arm around them, create a bit of social time. Other people don't want that arm around on social time. They just want to be left alone. So you've got all these different motivations at play. So if the managers can understand what drives and motivates them, they can have the right types of conversations, they can reward them in the right way, and they can harness the best from the individual as a result.
And I think that brings us back round to what you said earlier about now it's about managing the whole person, not just the employee that maybe the traditional approach looked at. Yeah,
definitely. And I think, I don't know if I want to be a manager in today's society, because you've got so much to deal with now.
Yeah. It's a difficult job. And we'll come back to that. So I think this is a perfect time then to jump into talking about the new book, How to Become an Employer of Choice. And I love the tagline here, Unleash Your Growth Through Talent Attraction and Retention. And as we said, the process kicks off with a QR code to go, which takes you through the employee engagement wheel. I've done it a couple of times myself. It's really interesting the way it's structured. It's a framework which helps companies become an employer of choice, and it covers 8 key drivers across 4 areas. So we have strategic narrative, engaging managers, employee voice, and integrity. So shall we talk a little bit around those 4 areas? And I think everyone likes a good story, so let's start with strategic narrative. And I often hear and read things now where, certainly from a marketing point of view, everyone's kind of shifted to this idea of telling stories about the owners and connecting with consumers that way. It does seem, though, that although that's the external view and companies are probably getting better at doing that, from an internal point of view, they're probably missing a trick and not including that, almost forgetting that as part of the recruitment and that kind of internal perspective on the talent recruitment and retention.
Yeah. So the reason I start with story, the strategic narrative, is a story about where you've been, where you are, where you're going. So that's the strategic narrative. The point of the story is that if you want to earn more money, tell a better story. That's what, first of all. Okay. So companies should be aware of that. And companies talk about their products and their services all the time. That just makes them a Me Too company, because I can buy their products and services anyway. It doesn't really distinguish them.
Yeah.
And then you've got to think, do you want staff to come to you to work for pay, or do you want them to work for a company where they're passionate? Okay. Now, a story, people buy in an emotional space. So a story ties them into the company. They understand why the company exists, what the owner was trying to achieve when they set it up, and the history, and also where they're going. And it's important to know where you're going, have a 3-year vision as well, because if you think about someone joining an organisation, they want to join an organisation they believe in, that's got a great story, but they also want to know how they're going to fit over the next 3 years, okay? And they want it communicated to them. So I talk to business owners and say, look, you've got a story, do all your staff know it? Oh, yeah, I do. Then we do the quiz, and then we realise that all the staff don't know it. Those who've been in there 10 years, since it started, maybe will know the story. Those who've just joined 5 minutes ago don't know the story, because it's not part of the onboarding process. And I said, look, all you've got to do is video yourself talking about the story and update it every 6 months, and it's part of your onboarding and everybody knows it. And then you stick it on your website, and that's a reason for someone to apply for a job for you as well. So you're missing an opportunity to really separate yourself out from the crowd by telling your story about why you started and what it stands for and where you're headed, so that people can get a sense of what they're joining. Rather than, I'm going to do that because the pay suits and I just want to pick up the pay.
Yeah.
Completely different.
So many good lessons in that story, just in terms of how you can embed it in your entire organisation, and from day one through the recruitment process, and then continue it evolving.
Yeah, and when I do this wheel, it's amazing that they think everybody knows the story and everybody doesn't, and everybody knows the vision, but everybody doesn't know the vision. The leadership team know it, but it hasn't cascaded.
No.
So people don't understand where they fit. So that's the strategic narrative.
Yeah. So moving on then to the second element, engaging managers. And I wanted to just share a quote that I've always really liked. Again, I know there's some Richard Branson quote in your book, but one of his that I've liked is this idea of training people well enough so that they can leave, but treating them well enough so that they don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Just a brilliant quote, and just kind of nails it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think when I heard it, it was the way I heard it. It was, well, what happens if we train people and they leave? What happens if we don't train them and they stay? Okay. So it's just a spin on it.
Yeah. Equally good.
Equally good. Yeah, you just want to build a culture where they feel they can grow, develop as an individual, and they've got a career path. And they can see it, and they know what they need to go and learn to fulfill it. If you can do, it's a simple thing, and the manager's getting out of the way and allowing it to happen. You know, and I look at that manager's one, and when I do this with a team, when we do this across the business and we do it with board, that one varies the most because it depends who, when they're marking it, which manager's managing them. Okay, because people don't quit their jobs; they quit their bosses, as we've discovered, talked about. So, and they're quitting their bosses because those bosses or those managers haven't been trained on how to manage them. So
I was going to ask you that. Sorry to interrupt, but management, it often seems like the last thing. If there's time left over in that person's day job, you'll do some management, whatever that might mean.
Yeah.
And also, there's a lack of training for those people.
Yeah, well, I was doing some stuff out in Dubai, and we had the Emirates in the room, and we were doing this kind of stuff with them. And they said, "Oh yes, our managers, it's part of their job. It's not an addition when they've got time. It's considered as part of their job." And I think that's the mindset you have to adopt. You need the skills, and part of your job is to manage your people, and you have to dedicate time to do it. Whereas what we have in this country, a lot is actually they're too busy, and they'll try and do it when they've got time. Yeah.
So absolutely, and I mean, so give us an example then from what your conversations with Emirates. What would look differently? How do they structure themselves, and what kind of practical things are in place that allow their managers that time to manage?
Well, first of all, they train them. So they train them in what management and leadership is, and understanding the difference, and they give them the tools. And then BMW is a good example. I think I heard that they spend 10 hours. They spend an hour with each individual every week on coaching.
Wow.
Which is, now that sounds horrendous when you've got a team of 10. That's a lot of hours, but and the managers resisted it in the first place, I believe. But now they love it because actually there's no problems as a result of it. They are not firefighting, because actually the issues are getting dealt with early, flagged up quickly, and it makes them more efficient.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible culture, isn't it, to have implemented that?
Yeah. So not sure how true it is, but that's what I heard. But so that philosophy, if you think about it, prevention rather than cure, you're not firefighting. You're actually dealing with things up front. And when I was out in Abu Dhabi with a particular airline, which we won't mention, training them in this Mojo process, one guy came up to us and he said, "This is the first time in 10 years anybody's asked me how I feel." 10 years working in a job and no one's ever asked him how he felt. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. So I'm sure there's people watching or listening that can probably relate to that, sadly.
Yeah. So I just couldn't believe it when he said that. I thought, wow. Yeah. It doesn't take a lot to listen to your people.
No, that's quite scary, isn't it?
And show a bit of interest.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's why I do what I do, I guess.
Well, exactly. Yeah. There's plenty of opportunity for you, I'm sure. All right. So next up, number 3, employee voice.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to the thing we talked about, Richard Branson again. So he would say, he surrounds himself with great people. So why would you employ talent and then dictate to it? He employs people so they can tell him what to do. So if you have the mentality of bringing in great people, listen to them. They're at the coalface, they know what the issues are, they're central to decision making. So the idea is to start to harness their thoughts and ideas in the decision making process rather than cascading messages. Okay, if there's a problem, they'll tell you. Let them solve it. If you gave a team, if you try to impose something on a team, they resist it. If you go, guys, we've identified a problem, you as a team have identified this problem, can you help us resolve it? They'll work for blood, sweat and tears because they feel part of it.
Yeah,
it's not rocket science.
No.
Bring people in, involve them in improving things because they want to improve it, and they flagged it up rather than you second guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we talked a bit about it off air, so to speak. But I guess if you're an entrepreneur or you're running a small organisation, there's also a kind of ego involved, and it's important, isn't it, to put that aside and make sure you're actually looking to hire people that might actually be better than you, to have skills that you don't have, because they're the people that are going to drive your business forward, and you need to give them that freedom.
Well, firstly, an MD's job is to make himself redundant, okay, so he can grow the business. So he wants good people. And also there's a new terminology coming in, well, it's been in for a while now, servant leadership, where you're getting out of the way, you're just orchestrating your people to be great. And that's the idea of a leader, is to take people with you, paint the picture and then take them with you, basically.
And have you seen any good examples in smaller organisations where people have been able to?
Well, I'll introduce you to. We said, but I'll introduce you to people. I'll get some people on your podcast that are doing a fabulous job at it. And where they're free. I've got a guy I'm going to be working with now. He's a plumber. He's got a plumbing business. He's got 3 or 4 depots. He is bored out of his brain because he's so organised with his team that he now plays tennis and he's bored. Now, how has he done?
It's a nice problem to have.
Yeah, well, we're all listening to him, feeling very envious when he talks. But there's an example of someone who has worked out how to get the best from his teams and is orchestrating his business, and he's able to turn up at networking meetings and play golf and things like that. And on the golf course, he could do a deal with his whole year's salary, couldn't he? Because he's there rather than being entrenched in his business.
Yeah, in all the weeds.
In all the weeds, or changing light bulbs and stuff like that, which I've seen. I've seen company directors where they've always done it, so they're changing light bulbs and stuff like that. And you think that's just not good use of your time.
No, you've really got to focus on where you can actually add value.
Yeah, so he's got his guys. They're all firing. They all love it. And he's building a culture now, and he's building, and he can scale that now, and he can sell it. That's the other thing, because it's, doesn't require him.
Yeah, no, amazing story. I look forward to meeting some of these people as you mentioned. So last up then, the 4th item we have, integrity. And I thought this is an interesting one, because integrity is one of those values, a bit like integrity, honesty. They're plastered on every entrance of every company up and down the country, and those values sadly can end up almost sounding quite generic. So how do you, when you talk about something like integrity, how does an organisation make that meaningful and not just like everyone else who has that as a value?
Well, values are really important, because if you're not living and breathing them, then you get mistrust in an organisation. Okay, so they say one thing and do another. So first of all, you're destroying morale. Okay, so you need to think about, and when you ask someone for their set of values, they have to scamper around and find them, or they've been on the wall so long they don't even see them all past and they can't remember. And if you ask them what they are, they can't tell you. So the idea is, let's get a set of values that have purpose and meaning in your organisation, and then you need to catch people in the moment, living and breathing them, and then there needs to be rewards and consequences. So if someone's lived a value like going the extra mile for a client, we'll always go the extra mile for a client, might be one of the values. Then when you see it, acknowledge it, reward it, recognise it. When someone's not going the extra mile, hey, that's not what we do around here. Okay, that's not how we behave. That goes against the values. So then you can take them into your appraisal processes. I reckon 90-day appraisal processes are better than annual. Annual's out the window now. 90-day. So you need to bring them to life and evidence them, and publish them on your website. Then your clients can tell you whether you live and breathe them as well. Okay. And I've actually taken some clients through a set of values. So these are your values. Now tell us how you're not going to behave. And then we publish those on the website. And if you ever catch us doing this, call us on it.
Yeah.
And if you catch us doing this, tell us.
It's a good twist on it, actually, isn't it? A different perspective.
Yeah, if you're brave enough to publish how you won't behave, then you can be accountable to your clients around it. And it's just a little bit of a positioning piece.
That leads us on to something else I wanted to talk to you that I'm always really interested in, which is company culture. I always like this phrase: if you have a strong culture, then people become that culture. But if you don't have a well-defined, meaningful culture, then that culture just becomes whoever you're hiring and those people. So company culture is something you hear talked about so much, but what do you think that actually means? Right,
well, there's a great expression that the culture eats strategy for breakfast, is the expression. Have you heard it before?
No, I haven't.
So culture eats strategy for breakfast. So just think about that for a minute. You could have the best strategy in the world, but if the people aren't behind it, it's never going to happen. If you have a fantastic culture where people are behind you, where they believe in the company, where the ethics are right, where they've joined it and they feel part of it, it's going to just smash. The strategy is going to be great because everybody's going to be behind what the business wants to do, which is the strategy.
Yeah.
So it's just reverse thinking.
That is brilliant. I really like that. I'm going to definitely use that.
Yeah. So that's why culture is so important to me. It's the way you do what you do, not what you do.
Yeah. So with that in mind then, what would you say differentiates a successful company in terms of company culture?
Well, the way to define that is think about companies you'd want to work for. You want to work for them not because of what they do, but because of the culture.
Yeah.
The way they treat you, the way they operate. So I think it's difficult. You'll know a good culture when you see it, but defining it's not easy.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's what kind of led me down this path to ask for your thoughts, because like I said, we talk about culture, but you can't, it's difficult to put your arms around and really kind of define exactly what it is.
I mean, there's examples. I think there was an airline, I think it was Qantas Airlines years ago, that said they'd never ever have a plane that didn't get from A to B, right? And then one of their planes crashed. Okay, so now they're held accountable to that culture, that value. So what the owner of the airline did was he went to the crash site, they rebuilt it, and he flew it back.
Wow.
So it got to be to stand behind what they believed in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think once you nail your flag to the post around your values, you're accountable to your audience, whether it's internal or external.
Yeah.
And that's your culture. If you're going to do this, live and breathe it, evidence it, stick behind it. And I'm sure there's other stories better than that one.
Yeah.
That will show how a company sticks to their values.
Yeah. That's a pretty amazing, dramatic example, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, hopefully there'll be maybe small business owners watching this, listening to this, and I think smaller organisations, as you kind of alluded to earlier, it's easier to maintain that culture because everyone there probably has direct line to the entrepreneur or the founder, and they live and breathe it, and they've heard the story direct and so on. How does a company maintain that culture, do you think? What are the things people can do if you're a small business owner and you're starting to grow? What can they do to maintain that culture? Right,
first of all, well, I'll just say this phrase and you'll understand. Systems run business and people run systems. So get that systemized. The way you do it, get it systemized so that as you scale, it can scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so you document the way you do what you do. Because if you take it another way, when you lose a good member of staff, sometimes an MD will look at it and go, we don't know what they did. They did all these great things, and now there's a massive hole. I'm going to have to find 3 people to do what that person did.
Yeah.
If they documented everything and documented the role for that, they can recruit straight into the role. because they've got a clear process around what that person did, and also a clear description of what they want.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're recruiting to a job description, not for a maverick. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because I think you sometimes see examples where you don't think about the documentation until they're about to leave, and then everyone's running around trying to find out everything the person does and documenting it.
Yeah, and then they can't work out. They say give it to a busy person, don't they?
Yeah.
And a busy person then leaves, and they did all these sorts of things. They did payroll, they did this, they did that. Now, how are we going to recruit now?
Yeah,
and there's a massive stop in the business whilst they're working it all out.
And it's difficult, I think, isn't it? Especially for those small growing businesses, because everyone's firefighting. It's all hands on deck. Finding the time to document and process tends to be the boring bit for a lot of certainly entrepreneurs.
And they don't like it. That's why they've got their own business, because they will escape it. But it's okay to get about 50 staff, and then it changes from an entrepreneurial business to a business-owned business, where you're scaling and growing. And if you don't have systems and processes at that point, you'll become inefficient. You may double your turnover but half your profit, because your systems and processes aren't robust, and you're losing money. Yeah. So you might as well get it right day one. Get your systems processes right so you can scale and grow, and it's a painless growth rather than a painful growth. Yeah,
no, great advice again. And we've talked a lot about all of this stuff from an organisational perspective. I just want to flip it on its head just to think about for an individual. For example, you have the motivational map framework where an individual can understand their own motivations. When I went through that exercise, the dominant factor was growth, which I definitely recognised, because that means, according to the report, that my motivations primarily come from realising my full potential. So learning and developing, challenging myself. One of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, to do something different. Why do you think it's important for individuals to understand their own motivations?
Right, well, when I first came across motivational maps, which was developed by James Sale, it changed the way I did my business. Okay, I recognised that I was good in front of public audiences. And I could get my sales calls all done in a week if I had 50 people in a room and have the rest of the week off. So it was quite enticing for me. And then we'd work out who liked me, who didn't, and then it wouldn't be a conversation about selling. It would be a conversation: do you want to do this? Yeah. So it was really enlightening for me. It's really important. There's 9 key work motivators. That's the thing. So we're not all motivated the same way. So it's really understanding where you sit, which motivations are important to you. At any given point in your life, because they will change, and not like personality where it's about your behaviours. This is about what gets you out of bed, what brings you into work, and it will be impacted negatively and positively by the environment, but also by the work and by your home life. So really understanding that enables you to, like you've worked out for you, which are your top 3 now. Yeah. We work with the top 3 because if we can get those firing for you, you're working off energy, not resilience. Yeah. Now, what I see in businesses is when a great person leaves, when someone really good leaves, you don't always spot it because they are professional and they're doing their job to the best of their abilities. But inside, a bit like Warren, they're dying, because they're working off resilience, which leads to ill health and to decisions to leave. So if we can work out what motivates you, then we can flick the switch and get you re-engaged with the business, because we're harnessing your motivations. So let me think of an example. So we had a situation in a recruitment agency I was working with where the marketing lady was outstanding at what she did. So the company promoted her and gave her own office. 3 months later, her performance had deteriorated to the point where they were going to have a conversation with her about leaving. So we did her motivations, and her top motivation was friend. So she loved having a community of people around her. So when she sat in the middle of the office, she got all the social media stories from all the people around her, which enabled her to be good at her job.
She had the energy from that.
All the energy, and then they said, right, here's your own office, more money. Actually, those 2 things didn't motivate her, and demotivated to the point where actually she became dysfunctional. Okay, so we just got her straight back into the middle of the office, and she didn't have to leave. So
pretty amazing, isn't it? Just a simple change, such a dramatic impact.
Yeah, and you think about businesses, they'll do hot desking. Now, hot desking means that you alienated all the friends because they love that community, that buzz. And then all the spirits who love freedom and autonomy go, yeah, I'd have to come into work. This is fantastic. I can design my life the way I want it. Yeah. So suddenly you've got, half the workforce motivated, half the work, and you've no idea you've done that.
No.
And then somebody important leaves, and you wonder why. So this is about understanding what's going on with your people, and let's make sure we're harnessing it. So we do it every 90 days to just check in, so you don't lose talent along the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's clearly beneficial for an individual just from their own kind of sanity and mental health point of view, their productivity, and finding an organisation that actually suits them. Pretty vital. Really enjoyed that walk through the 4 elements, but I think whilst I have you here, I also wanted to touch on another one of your recent projects. So if you don't mind, let's switch gear a bit and talk about Fit to Work, which is a brand new program you were commissioned to create by the YMCA. Would you mind sharing a little bit about how that came about and what that involves?
Yeah, so we met at just around the corner at a B2B event. I was doing a similar sort of thing. I think it was at the Aegeus Bowl, and I had a stand. I first met the lady from the YMCA at Chewton Glen at a networking meeting. Then she saw me again at this event, and she said, "I think you could help us." And so she ran this idea past me about helping people who were in their houses that would otherwise be homeless, getting into the workplace. And I had to run it past my business model, because my business model is about helping people and companies be great. And I thought, well, this is going to help people be great, and it's youngsters, and I'd like to do it because you can make an impact. So I said, look, I'll do it on one condition, that these people want to work. They're not just ticking a box. Okay, they want to work, and also that I can do it around setting them up for life with a mindset rather than form filling.
Yeah.
So I developed the Fit for Work, and it took me a while to work out what I wanted to include and what I didn't want to include.
Can I just jump in before you go through Fit?
Yeah.
Because I think this is what stands it apart, isn't it? Because there are services that help you fill in a job application or complete a CV, but the great thing about what you do is it's so focused on mindset.
Yeah, I wanted to change the way they thought. And if you change your thinking, you change your outcome. That was my philosophy. So first of all, I wanted them to understand themselves. I wanted to focus on them. So the F stands for focus. I wanted them to understand themselves. So we looked at their motivations, we looked at their personalities, we looked at their values, and we looked at how, and also because I based it around around NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. I wanted them to understand how we receive and process information, and how their past doesn't equal their future, and how the way they're processing information now is based on the conditioning they've had from a young age. And then to explain to them that we're going to challenge that thinking. So that was the focus bit.
And your car analogy, which you have to share.
Yeah. So if you're driving a car, you don't drive a car looking through the rear view mirror. You look at where you're going. So I wanted them to forget the past, or to put the past in a context they could deal with, removing the emotion from it. But the past isn't going to equal the future, is it? So let's draw a line in the sand. Where are we going next? So it's a coaching methodology. So let's look at where you're going, not what's happened. You can't change what's happened, but you can change where you go next.
Yeah.
So that led into the second part, which is the intent, which is to understand what stops you, what your limiting beliefs. So you running through your brain that stops opportunities coming your way, or stops life being the way you want it. So we looked at all their limiting beliefs and challenged them on their limiting beliefs to change the way they thought about stuff. And the way that we one of the things I did there was think about how a successful person would deal with this situation. Think about how someone who's not confident would deal with it. How are they talking to themselves? Completely different self-talk. So if your self-talk here, this is sabotage. If your self-talk here, this is actually going to take you in a direction you want. So we're going to clean up your language and the way you talk to yourself. And the other thing that I was talking about is when things go wrong in your life, how do you talk to yourself? Would you let anybody else talk to you like that?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
We're often harshest on ourselves in a way you'd never talk to a friend or anyone else.
We beat ourselves up in such a way we'd never let anybody else speak to us like that. So why'd you speak to yourself like that? So I got them to say, right, if you're going to speak to yourself like that, make it a sexy voice. Right? So at least you're getting beaten up by something that's quite nice. Okay? Or make it a Mickey Mouse voice so it has no power. Put it on the end of your thumb, move it to the end of your thumb from there to the end of your thumb, and tread on it. Okay? It's not serving you, it's your past conditioning and programming that's stopping you, and that's what's coming through with the voice. Okay, so when you talk to yourself, clean up your language. Okay, so if something bad has happened to someone who's really good, they're going to go, well, that was just a one-off, that's not going to happen again, I won't allow that to happen. Someone who's got negative thought processes, that always happens to me. See the difference? Completely. So now they're accepting it.
It's more like the victim, isn't it?
Yeah, the victim versus the victor. So we play around with that on day 2. And then day 3, we tend to look at, okay, so we've worked out who you are and your values and your motivations and your personality. We've dealt with some of your self-talk, which is the I, and the T stands for let's transformation. So let's build a plan for you to go out in the world and make a difference. So that's the T, transformation. And they love it. They love it.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, I know you're really passionate about all the work you do, but I mean, it must be super rewarding to see these young people getting into work. And so, what has the reaction been like? And can you talk a bit about some of the success stories?
Yeah. So, I had a guy in the Southampton group that when I walked in on the first day, I asked them all, "Why are you here?" Given that this is fit to get to work, and I said, "Why are you here?" to this first guy, and he said, "Well, I'm never going to work because I've got mental health issues." And I said, "That's interesting. So why are you here then?" So we challenged him a little bit around that, and then I dug a bit deeper. And he was a fantastic guy. He was helping out with the YMCA. Every time he went to the gym, he took people with him, and I said, "So you're 25, aren't you?" I said to him, "Yeah." I said, "So you've got probably about another 40 years where you could work, but someone's told you you've got mental health issues and you'll never work. So you're accepting that, are you?" I don't accept it. So we then started to work on it. By the third day, he used to do a live streaming. His computer packed up and he couldn't afford a new one. So I got him a new one, and I said, "Right, let's get your live streaming going," because he loves it. So it's just about enabling people to succeed, and if he'd carried on with "I'll never work because I've got mental health issues," that would have just destroyed him over time. Yes, he'd had a terrible upbringing, but now he's got an opportunity. Okay, and now he's focused in a way that's different. Now with the other example, in Basingstoke, I've got a person who was kidnapped, trafficked for 1.5 years. So you can imagine what that did to them.
Horrific story.
Saved by the YMCA, and put into one of their homes. Now works for the YMCA, and now has been promoted to a manager, and now is going to speak nationally. So we were working on some of her stuff, and it was fascinating how positive she is considering what she's been through, and just making sure she keeps her self-talk right, so she can move forward. And there's other examples as well. There's people with degrees there that are stuck in that situation I was talking to you about earlier, where they're caring for a father who's blind, therefore she can't move forward with her life, and she's the only family member that can do it. So I'm looking at ways, I'm still working with that group, so I'm looking at ways that we can free her from that, so that she can go on and do what she wants to do.
No, it's an amazing initiative, and I think you said you've currently got about 50 people already going through it, and
and I must mention it was sponsored by the Masons as well. I didn't tell you that bit, so they actually paid for the program to run, so that through their charity. So I think it's worth mentioning that as well. So that gave us the opportunity to design and build and deliver the course, and my remit when I started was if I could make a difference to one person's life, I'd be happy. And I know when I was that age, if I'd had some of the stuff that I know now then,
Yeah.
It would have been amazing.
Oh, it's just, yeah, when I heard about it and when I first talked to you about it, I just thought it's just a brilliant concept, just amazing, and it's a gift to these kids that have got access to it. You just mentioned the word happy.
Yeah.
And as you'll know, that's one of the themes we cover on this podcast.
Yeah.
What is happiness? And one of those funny things, such a small word, but can be so complex in the modern world that we live in. But what is happiness to you?
Well, happiness to me is being comfortable in my own skin, to be honest with you, and not being, there's so much social media around the way, you look at that person, they're better than me and all that kind of stuff that goes on for people. Well, it doesn't matter. Am I living the life I want to live? Am I happy in my skin? Do I feel comfortable with the way I conduct myself? And that's happiness for me, okay?
Yeah.
And I think you talked about success as well.
Well, we'll come to that. So, in terms of success, I guess the first question I always ask, and I'm interested in, what are the important skills that you think you've developed that allow you to become to do what you do successfully?
Yeah, I think to make my own decisions. I used to put a lot of store in other people, and sometimes wrongly. So you'd be, and we learn that through life. Actually, people trying to tell us stuff or trying to control us or manipulate us is not helpful. So I make my own decisions around who I want to work with and who I don't want to work with. Yeah. I make my own decisions about how I conduct myself. I hold myself accountable to myself. Yeah. But actually, I've learned not to beat myself up. I've learned to, if I want a day off, like today after this, I'm going to do nothing. Okay. And that will sound terrible to some people, but actually I need that time.
Well, this is the highlight of your day. It would only be downhill from here.
Well, that's anyway. The point, I did think that. I thought it's only going to get worse, so let's just quit.
Spend a day at the beach.
Have a day off and just do some of the stuff I want to do. Yeah. So, and catch up on myself and actually recharge my battery. So I'm very aware of managing my energy because I'm out with audiences all the time. Yeah. Sometimes you get completely knackered. And I do other things, like I play 5-a-side football 3 times a week. That gives me my mental health back. Yeah. And then of course I've got a home life. Yeah. So it's balancing all of those. That keeps me happy, basically. Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. And wrapping that all up then, through your journey, we talked about what success might have meant at the start. As you sit here today, what do you think of as success?
I think of success as having a business that functions well, that provides a living for me, and then having a good home life and good work-life balance, or balance as they call it nowadays, is important for me. I'm not one that wants millions and millions of pounds. I just want, for me, I cherish freedom and autonomy. I cherish making a difference, and I cherish actually being able to innovate and bring new ideas. Yeah. So they're the things that really float my boat.
No, and I was going to say, I really love the quote on your LinkedIn where you just say you're passionate about making people and businesses outstanding, which I think feeds into exactly what you see success as. Yeah. It's nothing. I can tell you now, there's nothing better than when I heard some of those stories about people really wanting to come to the sessions and it making an impact. Yeah. For me, that's priceless, especially at their age. No, absolutely. In the YMCA program. Yeah. Well, we're coming to near the end, and I always finish with a regular feature that I call Life by Misadventure. And as I mentioned to you, I always think it's interesting that there's so many great lessons in life that we learn from outside our work or extracurricular activities, whether you mentioned playing sports, we talked about travelling and so on. So from your point of view, can you think of a lesson that you've learnt from an unexpected source?
Yeah, years ago, I was working for a great company, doing a great job in the leisure industry, and then I got headhunted to work for a large organisation. I will remain nameless. An American organisation, and it was good money and it was a good challenge, and within a year I hated the job and I wish I'd never left the previous job. So sometimes what is shiny and gold isn't always shiny and gold. I think, and I learned a good lesson there. Actually, listen to your heart. It's not about the money, it's about what you do that counts.
Yeah, the grass isn't always
No, and
greener.
it definitely wasn't greener. And within a year, I wanted out, basically.
Yeah. And you talked also earlier when we were preparing about when you were travelling as well, and some of your experiences there. Out meeting new people, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I used to love when I was younger. You know, I'd just take off, go to a foreign country, arrive there, and know nobody. And it was kind of like ultimate freedom for me. Very weird, isn't it? But I just used to love the actual, nobody knows me, nobody knows who I am, I'm in a foreign country, I'm travelling around, this is going to be exciting. So it kind of like that, kind of just total freedom around it. Yeah, I can't explain it, but if you understand.
Completely, yeah.
So I loved that, and it kind of still goes with what I do now. I do like the freedom to enter, well, like the YMCA program, that was I'll do that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Just something different.
You got the flexibility where you can do that when you hear of something that you're curious about.
I have to be mindful of my time, but I just thought that was such an opportunity not to miss.
Yeah. Completely. Well, Steve, sadly, I think we're at the end now. I just want to say thank you so much. You've been exactly the great guest that I knew you'd be. So we could talk all day on this subject, and we've already talked about coming back and maybe doing something around the mojo and maybe focusing more on motivation. But for people who want to get in touch with you, what are the best links? I think you work under the name Skills for Business Training, as the t-shirt proudly says.
Yes.
So that's skillsforbusinesstraining.co.uk. What else, what other ways, if there's businesses watching, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can put Steve out in front of the Skills for Business and email me. They can call me on 07971 882628, and they can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. We'll put all those links in the description.
Thank you.
But thanks again, Steve, and I look forward to catching up with you next time.
Well, you've been a fabulous host, so thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, and the rest of the day is going to go downhill, isn't it?
I think so, sadly. Cheers, Steve.
Thank you.